Okay, next we're going to talk about at the core manufacturing. And we're going to talk about digital manufacturing, which means very different things for process and discrete industries. So I've asked Mark Vollrath, who leads technology and process innovation at Colgate, and Mitch, who is an expert in 3D printing and is working on a lot of work around digital manufacturing and discrete, to take the stage, and we're going to talk a little bit about the evolution of digital manufacturing. Come on up, gentlemen. So, when I first started in supply chain, I started in manufacturing. I started with safety shoes on my feet and a hard hat on my head, and I tell you, I just think manufacturing is so core to supply chain. So let's start out. Each of you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your manufacturing experience. Mitch, you want to start first?
Sure. I actually started my career as a machinist, tool and die maker. I went through an apprenticeship program doing automotive dies and then machining aerospace parts early in CAD, CAM, CNC in the 80s. And fast forward to today, 14 years ago, I founded a company called MFG.com, which is an online marketplace for the manufacturing industry. Inspired by hearing a commercial for LendingTree.com, request your mortgage, let lenders compete. And that was the genesis. I was thinking, what if I wanted something manufactured and I wanted factories to compete? And so today I'm executive chairman of MFG.com.
Okay. And Mark, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Manufacturing background, told Tim from General Mills, and it started my career out 5 years in a General Mills plant. Then moved on to Frito-Lay, helped them build 7 new plants during a time of high demand. And then the last 20 years been associated with and working for Colgate Palmolive, which is extremely global in nature. We have 57 plants in 32 countries, and actually our business is very diverse or globally, that only 20% of our business is here in North America, so we're very global in nature and have worked very closely with the plants for the last 20 years globally.
And one of the secrets to Colgate's profitability is vertical manufacturing, right?
Yes, we are. We don't outsource very much at all, and also we're heavily invested in vertical integration. So it makes the facilities, the challenges, the different technologies even wider.
So Mark, how did Colgate define digital manufacturing, and what are you working on? If you can help the group with, how you're building that muscle.
About 4 or 5 years ago, we defined digital manufacturing and as the convergence of every type of plant floor system that we have, whether it's motor control centers or individual pieces of equipment or PLCs or MES systems, which we're standardized on, and all of that merged together and bringing in and total convergence with our ERP system, and we're heavily aligned with SAP. All of those coming together to give us real-time information that provides actionable, and that's a key word, actionable intelligence. And that's how we've defined it. And we've put some very big investments behind that also. We've invested in people. We actually have plant systems engineers. We have also started new initiatives to replace some of our old technology that did the reporting aspects of things, such that we are bringing everything together in a project we call Opera, that all those things I named before are coming through one system, and the key there is it's role-based. In other words, whether you're a VP of operations or all the way down to the technician on the plant floor, you have your own dashboards, you have your own information, and it's all there. Whether quality, maintenance reports, production runs straight from SAP and so forth. So we've got that major initiative, even to the point that we're in the middle of what we call cost of sales. And in cost of sales, one of the agenda items, just like costs and safety and quality and everything, is now systems also. And we have roadmaps at each plant that show where we're headed on systems and the progress and where we're headed. So digital manufacturing, systems, controls, whatever you want to call it, we are heavily invested in that because we think there's a future there. And it's because also we're heavily invested in our own manufacturing structure and infrastructure.
Now, Mitch, you work a lot in the discrete space, and you're working with DoD, and you work a lot with visionaries around 3D printing and digital as it ties to images and the evolution of CNC and CAD/CAM. How do you define digital manufacturing?
Well, yeah, it is kind of broad, right? But I think about, design went from paper to CAD, and we had 2D CAD, then we had 3D CAD, and then CNC machines came along where you could, input the coordinates of the part into the machine, and it would cut it. And then we went from Thomas Register to Google, right? And there are a lot of things that are now intersecting, right? So the ability to take a component, a part that goes into any product, and have that made by a job shop or a factory, it's pretty darn reliable and easy today because it's digital, right? Because you're transferring digital data. That digital data feeds the machine tools. And if you think about analogies like the photo industry, right? We went from the dark room where you had to have a lot of skill and it was a craft. And today anyone can print a photo. That same analogy is happening in the digitalization of manufacturing because of the way things get designed in a digital way. And when you combine that with the internet and the ability for factories to very tightly define their capacity, their expertise, their credentials, and find niches, right? So now people can source these parts and components, and it can find its way to the factory that has the right capability, capacity, credentials at the right moment in time. And there doesn't have to be the vetting process that once was there because of the digitalization. So now, a CNC machine or other production device is not a printer, but if you think of it as a printer, if you put the part in and it cuts it and it works off of a digital file, it's pretty much going to be the same. So I think people are rethinking supply chain. They're rethinking the linearness of it and think of it in more of a dynamic way. And I think that convergence of internet, CAD, CAM, additive manufacturing technologies, all these things have converged. And I think there are some real great thinkers out there that are saying the traditional supply chain thinking around discrete parts is bunk, and they're going a total different direction. I think it's an exciting time.
So, Mark, if you think about 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and Mitch, I'm going to ask you the same question. How will this change your world? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. What do you see?
Well, we'll get back just to the previous talk. It has to boil down to business results. Mm-hmm. And when you define something and have a vision for it, it has to be driven by, how is it supporting the company's results? In our case, it would be asset utilization as the top KPI, and reduction of unplanned downtime, and doing those changeovers much quicker, and shorter runs, and all of those things. So when you tie it together against that, I think that the vision is that those numbers continue to go down. All you're doing is putting a tool in place. Now you have to learn how that tool, to use it. And that's a bigger challenge and easier said than done. But I think a natural progression of even traditional KPIs, leveraging the digital world on the plant floor, that's what is driving our vision type of thing. So I don't have anything fancier than that. Yes, we could show dashboards and great screens and all of that, but the end result is, are we getting more out of our assets and running more effectively and meeting customer needs more effectively?
Mitch, how about yourself? I mean, additive manufacturing, 3D, it's not ready for lots of things right now, right? We're seeing it in the braces we talked about yesterday, and are we 1 year, 3 years, 5 years out when you think about that vision?
Well, when you think about additive manufacturing, I think we're still at the dot matrix stage. We're very low resolution. And there were some good applications, as we talked about, with Invisalign and with hearing aids, right, being customized. But if you can make a product or a part by some other means, you probably would not use additive manufacturing to make it today. But the thing that I think is going to be most transformative over the next 5 years or so is I think supply chains are going to become more dispersed, more fragmented versus the linear model that many of them are today. And if you back up and think about one of the reasons that we went to very linear, lean supply chain models is because that's what at the time, that's really what was easier to manage, it was more efficient. But when you look at the tools and the connectivity today, it's actually okay to have more nodes in your supply chain and to assemble supply chains dynamically on the fly wherever you need to produce, whether that be in some region around the world or if you're producing something large that you don't want to ship and you want to produce that close to customers. And I think consumer demand, right, we are more of a customized, we want products customized to our taste on the fly. And this is perfect for digital. Now, whether it's produced by additive manufacturer or some other means, it doesn't really matter. But I think companies are now going to be less and less and less on the inventory. They're going to be on-demand manufacturing. They're going to assemble little supply chain ecosystems on the fly. And I think that's the thing that's going to be exciting to watch over the next 5 years, is we're going to see people get in the physical and the mechanical product space continue to get out of doing it themselves, just like the textile industry did years ago. And they're going to morph toward complete brand ownership, and they're going to leverage cloud-based tools to create supply chains so that they have a virtual factory of unlimited size that can scale up, scale down, and move on demand.
Yeah, Laura, if I can add to that,
Yeah.
because I think that Mitch and I are saying the same thing in different ways.
I think
there
you are
is
too.
a convergence going on of technology. Okay, whether it's at the lower level, the bigger level, the cloud level, whatever. And when you build up the capability of interdependency associated with what's available now, okay, it's going to be very, very powerful to whatever business end results that you have.
So Mark, I'm going to pick on you a little bit because one of the things we talked about earlier was the change management issue of real-time data, right? And, I've heard you say that the technology is less of the issue and it's really more our mindset and people and real-time data. Can you share some of your insights about that?
Change management, okay, you can put a tool out there, but unless you have the change management very well thought out, it's going to be a far bigger issue than any technology challenge. We have run into it time and time again on initiatives that we have put forward. You put a tool in place, and unless you've thought about the roles and the responsibilities that are required to use that tool, because you can put a tool in place, but if you don't use it, there's several analogies. If you don't use APO in the planning process and you use Excel sheets, you're going to lose all that efficiency and the potential of having bigger business opportunities. And so even the technician on the floor, to the line supervisors or operating teams, to the plant manager, they all have to understand their roles of using technology. And that's sometimes a much, much bigger hurdle than the technology application itself.
Well, and this alignment outside in, right? Because, manufacturing, not everybody embraces visibility or, having someone to coordinate their world. I mean, what do you see in Mitch?
Well, absolutely. I think there's, one of the things that I have watched since I started MSG.com in 2000 with this broad concept was, adoption, right? It's slower than anyone would have imagined. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. People don't like change. People don't move my cheese, man. Let me just get to retirement age. I just want to get to, and the world is going to change regardless of whether or not it if you embrace it or not, just like the Luddites couldn't stop the mechanization in the first industrial revolution, they weren't very successful, right? And there's Luddites in every technology sector, and there are Luddites in supply chain today. And I would say, be an embracer.
Now, you travel around the world, Mitch. I know you've been doing a lot of work in China. How do you think digital manufacturing changes global, local, and manufacturing topology?
It makes it easier, right? It makes it easier. I mean, if you back up before, digitalization, and you had a drawing or some prints that you wanted to convey, there was a lot of ambiguity in there, and you needed to sit down face to face. And what the digitalization has done is it's making it very, very easy to convey what you want produced in high resolution, in a high resolution. So there's just not much ambiguity anymore, right? And so people know what they need to do. They make it, they ship it, and so I think it's just taken a lot of the guesswork out of it, and it's actually made it easier to source anywhere and feel comfortable as long as they have the right equipment and skill set.
Mark, how about in the process world? How do you see this changing globalization?
It ties it all together with a lot of what we talked about yesterday. Okay, and talent shortage is not just here. We talked about yesterday how it is globally. So the automation and the efficiencies that we're trying to drive in the developed world, manufacturing world, and so forth, we're going to have to do, if you're not already, we're going to have to do it in the developing world too. So I see all parts of the world, having a demand for becoming far more efficient and leveraging the digital capabilities of what you can do on the plant floor. What I said before, real-time, actionable intelligence rather than looking in the rearview mirror. Okay, tools and reports and real-time data that supports lean manufacturing operations so that decisions can be made at the proper level in real time. Okay, and so that you can cut unplanned downtime on lines in half. But you got to learn how to use the tools. You got to understand that. But to answer from a global standpoint, I think, whether we've seen it, all of us have seen it traveling around the world. And in the manufacturing plant, you're going to see the same technologies leveraging, the same digital world capability, I think.
So, Mark, if you think about how this evolves, and some people are saying lights out factories. If you had a magic wand, Rick said he'd like an app for that. What would help you in this evolution of digital manufacturing?
Process and people. Rick said those come first. Okay, and a real solid plans with whatever technology you come up with has to be backed by the process and people capabilities associated with it. So if I had an app, it'd be an instant learning of here's how you use the tool, here's how you get the most out of it. I'm sorry you've been doing your job for 15 years this way, but you can do it better this way.
So a change management kind of application of what real-time data means in the factory?
Yes, I think so, because you're dealing with all the different levels of people within your organization. And you want them to realize, you can do your job a lot better and more efficient and help the whole company and give yourself some job stabilization. Yes, it's going to be a continually learning process, but even the technician on the plant floor, it's not your father's supply chain anymore, and because of that, every 5 years, every 3 years, whatever, there's going to be constant change. So get your mindset, and today's change, not flavor of the day, but today's change and new tool and new technology is this. So if I had a magic wand, it isn't anything fancy on the technical side. It's more of how do I keep the process and the people going with it.
Mitch, how about yourself? If you had a magic wand and you could change the ecosystem, because you're an entrepreneur, right? I don't know how many people know manufacturing.com, but it's a wonderful connection for people that need discrete items. You know, if you had a magic wand, what would you do?
I'm going to be pretty aligned with Mark. It's about change management and mindset. Now, obviously, everyone here is open-minded. That's the reason they come in and participate.
Yeah.
But everyone's not like this select group, right? And I think it's really around just a mind shift, a curiosity. How do we reinvent ourselves so that our companies are not typewriter producers, right, in the future? And I think that's the key. It's really around change management, creating curiosity, embrace it. And having people try, experiment. You don't have to go jump off a cliff wholehearted and start to do things in a more digital, dynamic way. But take a small project and test it and try it. And I think, I would just encourage people to, put their toe in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, it's going to be, they'll wish they had.
Which toe would you put in the water? Would it be to digital image, to CNC, or would it be additive manufacturing, or where would you start to experiment?
I would probably start with just doing some sourcing around different places wherever you happen to need it, and just by sending them your digital assets in an intellectual property digitally encrypted way, and just figure out how to work with very digital enabled factories or subcontractors, and try different ones, different places, and realize that the pricing that you get will be somewhat consistent, the quality will be somewhat consistent, the delivery will be somewhat consistent. And I think it's what I would encourage people to do is break out of the very linear thinking and start to think, what if we had more suppliers of certain products that we could tap on an on-demand basis if we needed to scale up or scale down, or produce in Ecuador or in Vietnam. And I think the days of producing everything in one factory, whether it be in China or Vietnam or Mexico or in Chicago, and then shipping it to all points around the world, I think those days are what's ending.
All right, what questions do we have for the panel? Because I think this whole world we grew up on around constraints and manufacturing and where constraints are have really changed. Trevor wants to ask a question on the front row. Heather, if you don't mind, come that way. Any other hands, people want to ask questions? Well, Trevor gets the mic. And Trevor, if you can just say your name and who you're with.
Trevor Miles, Canaxis. Hi to both of you. Great discussion, but from the dot-com period, we heard this word what's it called?
Disintermediation.
Disintermediation, there you go. Thank you, Laura. And Laura brought it up a few days ago. I've been wondering all of this time since that period is, what does this mean in terms of the disintermediation of middle management? Do we need to also change the structures of our organizations in which we make decisions as we move into this process, rather than just saying the people down at the bottom need to change? Don't we also need to change as we go up the hierarchies and look at different hierarchies, more of a matrix organization?
So let's don't limit it to just disintermediation. Let's talk about the design of the organizational structure. How do you think it changes, Mitch?
That is a fantastic question, so thanks for asking that. It does change a lot, because everyone has to add value within an organization, right? And with the tools today, all of a sudden companies are acting differently, I see, such as I'm seeing some significant companies that the design engineers that are designing the products, they're almost in real time collaborating with suppliers, right? They're using some secure internet portals, they're putting it out there, they're getting feedback from suppliers in real time. And when you can get the guys or gals that actually design the parts and things, talking directly with the people that are going to make it, amazing things happen, right? Versus it goes up the linear chain, and then you get someone who is amazing at sourcing and at their job, but they don't really have the technical acumen, right? And that's one of the byproducts of the erosion of the industrial sector in America, is we don't have a lot of people that have this technical knowledge to be able to look at things and understand what are the cost drivers, right? Because in any product, the ability to take cost out of it the greatest opportunity is in the beginning, right? How it's conceived and how it's designed. And if you design in costly things to manufacture, it's going to carry itself all the way through. And so one of the things I'm seeing in organizational redesign is people are moving very early, the product engineers, saying use these tools, discover suppliers, talk to them, collaborate with them, ask them as you're designing in an iterative way, what can we do to drive the cost out of this? What are the cost features that are driving this? And I think the power of is getting very dispersed within organizations.
Mark, organizational impact.
Again, Rick talked a little bit about a key piece of making a plant run with a lean program is engagement. If technology can support that engagement factor of getting people closer together and providing information, I don't care if it's how has this line run for the last 5 minutes, and then it's on a big display board, and it tells you exactly what went down and what ran, but it's real-time information. If that can provide better engagement of the maintenance team or the operators or the quality people or whatever, because you're always still going to have, it's not going to be a lights-out plant, at least in my world, okay? It may be in others. If it can help engagement, that's going to help the organization. So I don't see any drastic, redesigns of how a plant is run. We've got them pretty, sparse now. But if you can leverage the technology to heighten the engagement of every person in the plant, you'll be better off.
But our planning systems were built on assumptions of mean time failure, right? Which really drive maintenance, right? And if we are now dealing with different sets of constraints, how does that change planning, right? If we're able to...
It's automatically linked. You take the history, just like the Nest thermometer in your homes, if you guys have ever had that, it learns, okay? Now that you have this convergence of technology, which we have right now, and it feeds back in, you can adjust that master data automatically, even based on history. It's its own demand, reading type of thing. So you're right.
Because I envision that we could do cognitive reasoning, like we were talking about
Yes.
big data on this real-time layer for learning systems where we no longer run manufacturing by theory of constraints. So how far away are we from that? We don't know.
No.
Okay.
I think the cognitive learning process within a plant is not that far away because we're now getting down to the plant employee level.
Yes.
You ran this machine for this amount of days and it ran this inefficiently or efficiently. Okay, I now also have that linked into what training as an operator you've taken. Okay, I've got it linked into your past performance record. And I can use all that data to help that specific employee even. Now that you've got this convergence of all these standalone old systems and now they're all talking to one another, a guy comes up with an ID badge, this happens today, and logs into a machine, I'm ready to start my shift, and the machine says, no, you can't run me, you haven't been trained on my machine.
Different world. Mitch, what do you think? Does it change the world of constraints?
I think constraints are falling all over the place, right? I think constraints are falling all over the place. And what we, as you eloquently said earlier, what we knew as what we were constrained by, what we were taught by, it's just gone now, right? It's really up to your imagination. I'm seeing people integrate systems or use technologies that were totally intended for something else.
Like,
right?
give me an example.
Example being augmented reality, right? I'm seeing augmented reality become used on plant floors where people can hold up an iPad, look at a machine, see like the inner workings of that machine, the maintenance history on it, and then touch parts and say, I need to order that part from the supplier, right? And then look at but the augmented reality that started there, it was more of a game. It was more of a game thing, right? And so these types of technologies are now being adopted into industry. So.
What other questions do we have for this panel? Yes, sir. If you can just say your name.
This is Rick.
Yep.
Cecere. So this whole personalization discussion has got my mind spinning. And I guess, Mitch, from your perspective, this conversation may think about augmenting for a company like Colgate or Kimberly-Clark what could be from what we do to the other side of the coin, which could be very disruptive.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, I'm not sure I'm all that interested in the Rick Cecere personalized toothpaste.
Yeah.
But I might be very interested in personalizing the design of jewelry.
Sure.
So what's your perspective on how much of this is going to be disruptive versus augmenting, what we currently do?
I think company. I got two points I want to hit on here. So, companies making somewhat generic products today are commoditized, right? And just like Starbucks charges us $4 for a cup of coffee because they customized it for us on the fly, versus you could buy one for $1. Product companies are sort of reinventing their value proposition. They're realizing their margin lies in some element of customization, right? There's a company that does enclosures called Great Lakes, and they just built a beautiful configurator, right, to build these enclosures for all sorts of things, whether it be servers or different things. And since it's all produced by CNC, if you want to change the size or the hole pattern where the airflow is or where you mount, you just do a couple of things. It reprograms the CNC on the fly and cuts that. And so now you're ordering. Now you can take their standard enclosures off the shelf and pay a price, but when you customize it, you pay 1.5 or whatever the number is because it customized. But in reality, the machine didn't really do much different, right? So there's huge margins in that customization. But also say Kimberly-Clark is one of our customers for our live source product that MFG.com has. It's our cloud-based sourcing and SRM tool. And those guys that are designing machines, the diaper machines, very creative. Brian Clare and the team over there, very creative. They're using the technologies very well to do some things around producing custom machinery. How do we create dynamic supply chains? If we need to do that somewhere around the world, maybe we want to make a diaper machine in some other country, how do we create a local ecosystem? And that has a lot of good reasons, as you know, that it builds goodwill in the community. It gives you a local ecosystem of spare parts suppliers. And so Kimberly-Clark, really, I commend you guys for the way you're thinking and embracing.
But I think, Rick, we have to step back, and the constraints that we define the supply chain, we really got a challenge, right, in terms of the definition of manufacturing and the use of real-time data and the sharing of digital images and the role of customization and the role of suppliers. And if I think to Mitch, to contract manufacturing, we've been doing some research on contract manufacturing. It's not very profitable. There's not a contract manufacturing in the discrete space that has had an easy ride. And as I think about contract manufacturing and third-party logistics and what we could do with this, right? I think it's really exciting.
It is. And I think you can make a lot of money in contract manufacturing when you find a niche, right? And that's what and that's what digitally connected world allows you to do. Because before, contract manufacturers would take whatever came in the door because they needed it or whatever their connections were. Today, they're defining a very small niche and say, we are the best in the world at doing this with these materials, blah, blah. And they can cast a very wide global net to find the customers for that. And they're extremely profitable because they carved that niche and they stopped being generalist. And that's how you make money in contract manufacturing.
Other questions? Yes. Hi, Corinne.
Hi, Corinne Bursa with Legility. So a couple of things, a couple of themes as you've been talking, and Laura, you hit a nerve when you started talking about theory of constraints. It actually seems like we would be introducing more constraints or more considerations as we multi-source or we look at tapping into local manufacturers perhaps for parts or components or full-sourced goods. And I think that puts the onus on the business to do more investment around training. And we talked about this yesterday. So we've got a talent shortage that's looming on the horizon. How do you change the culture of the business today to invest more in making your manufacturing experts, your supply chain experts, more tech savvy? I mean, beyond just how do they use the software or technology that's in front of them, but how do you build that curiosity, Mitch, that you talked about, to connect the parts so that we have lots of Mitches running around, lots of Marks, lots of Ricks, lots of Loras out in the industry that are able to contribute at that level to their business?
Sure. Well, I think the best way is to find, find a way to get people to get hands-on and some sort of, however the company wants to do that. 'Cause, there's a lot of stuff. The tools to make things, everybody talks about the maker movement and the makers today. The tools to make things, whether it's from the digital design to low-cost 3D printers to small CNC machines to laser scanners to copy objects to reverse, they're pretty cheap. And I think once once employees and key team members get their hands on something and they get to actually make something, whether they make a case for their cell phone or whatever it is, they become curious, they become intrigued. I'm fascinated by a business model a guy named Mark Hatch founded in San Francisco. It's called Tech Shop. And Tech Shop is a shop where they're doing like a gym membership style where you can go in and you can use all these tools to make things. And then just like a gym would have a trainer to train you on fitness, they have trainers that will train you on how to use the different manufacturing technologies, the digital tools. And I think, from what I'm gathering from Mark, one of the great avenues he's seeing is companies are sending some of their employees to Tech Shop and saying, teach them how to make a prototype for a new product that we're thinking about doing. Right? May or may not be a successful product, but now you engaged people in actually making something so they understand what goes into turning something from concept into reality. And that allows them to then collaborate better with suppliers to understand what's involved.
Well,
Here we go again.
Yep.
Change management. That's what you're talking about. One of the first rules of change management is you drive it from the top down. We had Lora come in a little over a year ago to talk to our top, people in the supply chain and to talk about the digital world so that they can get educated, because most of them are the last ones to ever spend time to understand what's out there, what's coming, et cetera, like that. You got to start at the top, and then they have to find a niche in their agenda and their everyday operations life to continue that education and also be curious enough to drive it down in their organization. So again, we're talking change management.
But Mark, as we think about change management, one of the opportunities that I have really enjoyed in working with organizations is the intersection of R&D and manufacturing, and both process and the digital world. And bringing both of those groups into tech shop kind of environments, or starting with white sheets of paper, what do you see happening there? Because I think that's still a big gulf that this digital world can help us close.
It is, because traditionally, the design engineering team, the marketing team, the sourcing team, they don't talk. They live in silos, right? And I think that's just a tremendous opportunity for those to use whatever tools it is, or just get into a freaking room and be together, right? But when you can get the product team, the marketing team, the sales team, the finance team, everybody talking, collaborating around something, magic happens. But it's so interesting the way back to the question earlier, the way our corporations have typically been architected. We live in silos, right? You pass it over the wall, and that person gets it, and every time it gets passed over the wall, it gets diluted a little bit, and then we end up with a watered down product that could cost us more to manufacture than it should.
But what I see in those processes, Mitch, and I don't know if you see the same thing, is we have paradigms of traditional constraints in our thinking about how R&D works, how manufacturing works. And so when you ask people to start with a blank sheet of paper that combines Internet of Things and digital and mobility and talk about real-time information and digital images, it's just wonderful to see what they come up with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I think is just a great opportunity. I know GE is buying, one of the low-cost 3D printers, and they say they're going to put one on every engineer's desk because they want them to be able to print the things that they're designing in actual size or tiny scale. But when you can actually hold something and look at it, you get a better perspective, right? Versus looking at a piece of paper.
Yeah. Other questions? So as these folks go home, Mark, what's the one thing you want them to remember? And Mitch, I'll ask you the same thing in a minute. What's the takeaway?
Technology application in the manufacturing arena is there's all sorts of opportunities, and you need to have a roadmap there. But most of the time, that's the easy part. It's process and people and change management.
Mitch?
I would say just, be curious. Be curious and try things. Try sourcing in a different way. Try sitting down with the product designers and engineers and understanding what digital tools they're using, and even different parts of your organization. And I think if you just spend time learning what people are doing in the different areas, you'll see opportunities to connect those dots and leverage that same digital asset across the enterprise, and then how it extends out to the ecosystem of suppliers. And I would encourage people to find some way to experiment with some of the new technologies around 3D printing. Whether you buy one and put it in the office. I've got one on my desk at home. I've got a cube printer by 3D Systems. They're like, it's $1,200. Put one in the office and let people at lunchtime use some of the free CAD software, design a cell phone case, print it out. They'll have amazing satisfaction from having done that, and they'll learn just some basics.
Well, let's give a hand for the panel as we think about the future.
Thank you.
So as we rethink constraints, we rethink complexity, and we think about digital assets, a whole new world happens. We're going to take a 30-minute break, then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about risk management and the evolution of the global environment with risk, and then we're going to wrap up the conference. So love the networking and the energy. Let's go get it. Thanks, guys.